Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. But if you're new here, my name's Tyler and I just do consistent content on all things related to hockey and the NHL overall. And boy oh boy are we in for a fun one today. As you guys have probably seen on the channel, I've done many mock drafts, but today is going to be very different and is going to be quite a long and fun ride. Even with the likes of Henrik Lundqvist, and I will touch on that in this video as well, we're going to have a very long mock draft, this time covering picks 1 through 31, the entire first round. And we will be discussing many prospects in particular. Along with me is, of course, Statboy Steven. If you don't know Statboy Steven, he, of course, has his own podcast called Under Review, where he discusses many things regarding not just the NHL and hockey overall, especially European prospects. He is a journeyman. He's originally from the Netherlands and currently resides in Vienna. And he has traveled all around Europe to experience, interview, and meet many different prospects the NHL has to offer. He is what many has known him for, of course, being connected with MSG Networks for the New York Rangers, meeting Elias Anderson a couple years ago, and he has met plenty of other great Ranger prospects as well. So I can't wait to get in this video. And yes, he does in fact have a connection with Nikolai Babarov, and he will touch on that in the video shortly. But thank you all so much for being here. I hope you guys enjoy. This is going to be a fun one. And without further ado, let's get right into the video. All right, Steven, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's, I always like doing collaborations and looking forward to this one.
Okay, so I have to ask, what is the connection between you and Nikolai Babarov? Obviously, Babarov is the director for European scouting for the New York Rangers, has been for the past 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. As you know, I've been traveling around Europe for the last couple of years, meeting some prospects. Met Nils Lundqvist and Vitaly Kravtsov at a junior tournament in the Czech Republic. Was even on Russian television following Vitaly Kravtsov, which was pretty weird, like showing my mom that video with Russian subtitles. She didn't understand anything of it. So yeah, and of course my Twitter account was growing and people started to follow me. And then when I got to the draft in Vancouver, where we drafted Capo Kakko, there was an opportunity to get a quick picture with like scouts of teams and coaches and GMs. Because when they leave the arena, they cross the street to the parking lot where they get on the bus, and the bus then takes them to the hotel. So as we're waiting there, John Davidson comes out, and every Rangers fan wants a picture with John Davidson, and and then Jeff Gordon, David Quinn walk out, and I'm talking to my friends. I'm like, oh, if I see Nick Bobrov, I want to take a picture with Bobrov because he's sort of my hero. As the director of European scouting, he made this rebuild a lot of fun for me, with the Rangers focusing on European prospects. So finally, Bobrov comes out of the building, and I go, "Hey, Mr. Bobrov!" Like I'm a kid. I acted like a kid, but he walks up to me, and I'm like, "Hey, can I take a picture?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And as we're posing for the picture, I tried to explain, I'm a Rangers fan living in Europe. I'm a huge fan of your work and what you've done for the rebuild. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, Steven, we know who you are. And I was shocked. And my friends were like, what's going on? How does he know you? I'm like, I don't know. And it was a bit weird at first. And then all of a sudden we were talking, and the second day we saw them again. And then Chris Drury also walked up to me and he's like, hey, I think that's Statboy Steven. And we were just all laughing. It was a lot of fun.
That is fantastic.
And then Nick Bobrov gave me his business card, and they had like these Ranger pins on their jackets, and he gave his Ranger pin to one of my friends. I mean, it was such a great experience. And yeah, I emailed him a couple of times just with some questions, not too obnoxious, but yeah, it was a fun experience going all the way to Vancouver to see Kakko get drafted. And in the end, Kakko being drafted wasn't even my favorite moment of the weekend. So
that's phenomenal. No, I myself have been fortunate enough these past couple of years to meet some Rangers, whether it's in the organization or alumni. These past 2 years, I was at the Rangers season home opener, and they, of course, have a little blue carpet. They do an introduction by Kevin Weeks. I had a chance to meet him. Awesome. And plenty of other people as well. And I was fortunate enough to meet the likes of Brian Leach, Ron Duguay, plenty of other guys. And not to really throw this out there, but I kind of am. Mika Zibanejad 2 years ago when he's walking down the aisle, I grabbed his shoulder. I was trying to get a photo with him, but he was too concerned with everyone else. And ever since then, he has been a top 10 centerman in the NHL. So not saying that I had anything to do about it, but I'm not denying it either.
Yeah. I have a fun story about Zibanejad too. It'll take like 20 seconds.
Go for it.
So I was in September. I was in New York for the preseason, and I have this Sweden Anderson jersey that I've had for years now, and I always wanted to get it signed. So Elias Anderson and Mika Zibanejad walked to MSG together because at the time they were staying in the same apartment. And I walked up to Elias and asked if he could sign a puck, but I forgot the jersey. It was still in my hotel room. So 2 days later, they play. I think the third game was against the Flyers. They play the Flyers on the Thursday, and this time I had the jersey with me. And again, Zibanejad and Elias Anderson walk up to us, and I walk up to Elias and I ask, "Hey, can you sign my jersey too?" And Mika looks at me and he's like, "This is the second time you just ignore me. Don't you like me?" And they both started laughing. I mean, hockey players really are different from any other sport with how they interact with fans.
Without question. They're fantastic.
Yeah. They're very down to earth, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, and we're gonna get right into the draft content in a second, people, and we will of course be doing picks, as I mentioned, 1 through 31. I'm gonna ask Steven, of course, his thoughts on a lot of prospects. We're gonna probably compare and contrast who we think is gonna go where for each pick. But to round up when it comes to Steven, make sure you also follow him on Twitter and check out his podcast. I will have it in the description down below. But he is really a prospect guru, at least to myself and plenty of other people, not just in the Ranger community, but the hockey community. And he has had the privilege of interviewing and meeting so many great, not just Ranger prospects, but prospects as a whole. What are some prospects to you personally that you would say were the best that you've ever met when it comes to, say, Ranger prospects or just hockey prospects overall?
Let's see. Ranger prospects. Niels Lundqvist is probably my favorite Ranger prospect that I've ever met. I met him about 8 times.
Wow.
I'm Facebook friends with his grandpa, so it's
getting real.
It's pretty serious. No, but I mean, I met his family at several tournaments, and we just started talking. And you know, these families love the fact that there's someone so invested in their son or grandson's career, and they know that. And I tell them, you know, if he was drafted by another team, I probably wouldn't be here right now. But I follow Ranger prospects, but they love it, you know, and they love interacting with people because they feel proud. They feel proud of what their son or grandson has achieved at that young age already. I've met Vitaly Kravtsov's dad and sister in Vancouver at the World Juniors. That was
I recall the photos.
Weird experience. I was going into a Starbucks because my phone my phone didn't have connection, so I needed to get to Wi-Fi to connect to a friend. And as I walk into Starbucks wearing my Dr. Chelyabinsk jersey, a beautiful blonde woman walks up to me and asks, "Can I take a picture of you and my dad?" And I was like, "This is weird." And as the guy walks up to me, I'm like, he looks, and Vitaly Kravtsov looks a lot like his dad. You can see the family resemblance immediately. And as he walks up to me, I immediately know, okay, this must be his dad. I'm like, oh, then that must be his sister. And so yeah, we took a picture and then we exchanged details and we follow each other on Instagram, and it's just a lot of fun to go through, to go to these tournaments, these junior tournaments, and just interact with people. And the draft is probably, if people want to interact with prospects and with media people like Elliot Friedman, just go to day 2 of the draft. Not this year, but any other year. Just go to day 2 of the draft. The tickets are like $10. If it's close to where you live, just go there. And you can interact with everyone. You can interact with Elliot Friedman, Bob McKenzie. You can talk to Ranger scouts. You can talk to players. Brady Tkachuk was there last year. It's just a great experience. Non-Ranger prospects, I think my favorite is Anton Lundell, who I've met a couple of times.
I am so excited to see what he does in the NHL. He's one of my favorite prospects.
Yeah. He's very mature as a player for his age, very mature. He's an alternate captain for his team in the Finnish league this season already. And yeah, he's just a really complete player. And he may not be as flashy as some of the other guys projected in the top 10, but I just really like his overall game. And and also just a really nice kid to talk to, and they all just take their time, And nothing against all the other prospects I've met, but those two are probably the ones that stick out the most.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, Lindell, I'm a huge fan of. I can't wait to talk about him in this video. But okay, so as we know, guys, you see by now we have cap friendly set up. I've done this in previous videos as well. If you see, we have picks 1 through 31 here. This is first time I'm doing all 31 picks on the channel, so I'm really looking forward to this. And I think we can all agree with starting off, it's going to be none other than Alexi Lafreniere. I think you'd have to be a madman at this point to choose otherwise. But Alexi, it really doesn't get much better than him. And I'm not going to spend too long on each prospect that we go over, but Lafreniere, of course, 112 points in just over 50 games in the QMJHL this past year, and he had 77 assists. Lafreniere is the biggest part as to why this draft class has been so coveted for years now, and it is amazing just seeing how everything fell in the Rangers' hands. As a Rangers fan personally, I'm obviously ecstatic. I never thought that they would luck out this way. And yes, there's a debates if it's rigged or not from the ball being dropped, among other things. But needless to say, the Rangers surely are going to have a guy that they may very well never have in their organization before or again. He is just that good. His overall game is phenomenal. His playmaking, his no-look passes, his wicked shot, his hockey IQ is just on another level. And it's remarkable when you look at all the other players in this draft class that we will be discussing this first round, like the Quinn Byfields of the world, the Stutzlas, the Marco Rossi's, the list goes on. And even then, Alexi Lafreniere is steadily going to be first overall. Anything you want to touch on that?
Yeah, Lafreniere is the consensus #1 pick. Shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. What impressed me the most about him is how he rounded out his game in his final year in the QMJHL. He was already dominating the year before, and he just worked on the areas where he could still improve. So he's a much more complete player now than he was a year ago. And I saw him at the World Juniors here in the Czech Republic, and he was just dominating on the ice against 18, 19-year-olds. Like you said, the Rangers never had a player like this. Usually they get this player when they're 31 or 32. They get him in free agency. To get a player as a teenager who's going to contribute on an entry-level contract for all 3 years, that's huge. And this is going to alter this is going to change the history of the franchise, in my opinion.
I completely agree. I have the newspaper frame behind me of Lafreniere when the Rangers won the lottery. I really think this is truly just a beginning for the franchise with bringing Laff in. But now to number 2, which is probably where controversy may start in these discussions. Who do you think, or in your opinion, who do you think is best fit to go second overall?
I think that Quinton Byfield is probably still the consensus #2 pick here.
Okay. Yeah. No, it really is a coin flip for me. I felt that Byfield was a lock at 2 for a pretty long time. But then when I started scouting Stutzla more, just seeing how well he's done over this past year, he really wasn't in high rankings at all until his first year, of course, playing in Dell. He has the now record as an 18-year-old with points per game in his rookie year there, what I think is 0.82. He had 34 points in 41 games. So I think for LA, it would make sense just because of his versatility, both playing on the wing and the center position. When you look at their prospect pool already, they have so many great names there with the likes of Gabriel Velarde, Alex Turcotte, among others. So me personally, I'll go Stutzla. But I think for the sake of this video and because how long Byfield has been a lock at 2, I'll put him back at 2 for the LA Kings. And Byfield is just fantastic in his own right. He had 82 points in this past year in 45 games played. He's one of the most complete forwards in this entire draft class, needless to say. His control on the puck is phenomenal. Just how fast he is. Being around, I believe, 6'4", 6'5", over 200 pounds. He is going to continue to grow, which is really exciting to see. But he reminds me so much of Kreider-esque with how fast he is, given his size. I love that aspect of his game.
Yeah, and what's also important to note is that he's one of the younger players in this draft, while Lafreniere is one of the older players. They're almost a year apart.
Oh, wow. I see. I didn't even realize that. I haven't focused too heavily on his age. So that is very important as well. Very key for the LA Kings. And, when you look at LA, I've had them taking Stützle. It won't surprise me if they still do, but for the sake of him being a lockout too for a while. And when you look at the Kings, yes, I know they're a different team now, but they're known as the Big Bad Kings back in their 2012, 2014 run. They were a bigger body team, had great center depth, big bodied centermen too, along with the likes of Anze Kopitar, obviously, and of course, Jeff Carter, among others. They were just bigger bodied centermen and forwards that were so tough to go up against, and Byfield would fit great with that type of organization if they hope to kind of bring that similar type of LA Kings run in the future, because I think they will be competing sooner rather than later. Their prospect pool is stellar.
Yeah.
But next on to the third overall pick. In my mind, it has to be Stützle then, but I understand the arguments for Raymond. What are your thoughts?
I think we're going to disagree here then, because I don't think Raymond is going to go top 5 because of some concerns that pro scouts have voiced about him. And with Ottawa having 2 picks in the top 5, I do think that they'll go with a forward and a defenseman.
Which is understandable.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if here at 3, they go with Jamie Drysdale and then pick a forward at 5.
Oh, that is bold. Oh, I see. It's hard for me to go with that only because Dorian has made it pretty clear that they're going to take whatever scraps are left to them between the likes of Byfield and Stützle at 2. So I think it just makes more sense for me personally to go Stützle. I'm going to pick him here, but I think it is a great argument to be had with the likes of Drysdale because he is the best player in this draft class, no question. If Drysdale doesn't go to Ottawa at 3, where do you think would be the next realistic pick? You think 5?
If he doesn't go to Ottawa at 3, it probably goes at 5, because at 4, I think Detroit goes with, if Stützle is not there, because I think Stützle will be there at 4, and Stützle will then be the Detroit pick. They, of course, have some experience drafting from Germany, so they feel comfortable in that area. The other 2 players I see going to the Detroit Red Wings at 4 would be Jake Sanderson or Cole Perfetti. Cole Perfetti has been linked to the Red Wings as well by some people in the last couple of weeks. And Jake Sanderson as the second best or first or second best defenseman in the draft class, depending who you ask, would also fill a need for the Red Wings. So they could either go with Stützle as the German to pair with Seider on the team, or go with Sanderson to bolster their blue line. But Perfetti is the guy who has been linked with the Red Wings the most in recent weeks. So I don't know how much weight we should put on that, but it's interesting to at least mention that.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're completely right. And Sanderson, I think, is just a little bit of a stretch this early, only because when you look at them getting Seider just a year ago as well, I'm not sure if that is necessarily the direction Yzerman would want to go in with getting a defenseman back-to-back years at high in the draft when their offensive prospect pool isn't terrible by any means. Philip Sedina, I'm really excited for him, but they definitely need depth at the offensive position too. And given the type players that will be available at 4, for me personally, it's really hard to go up against the likes of Raymond. But let me ask you, when it comes to Detroit at 4, who do you think would be the best fit in your personal opinion versus necessarily the reports that you've seen?
The best fit, like I said, if he's there, Stützle is the best fit for the Detroit Red Wings. He fills a need on offense. He plays multiple positions, so he's versatile. And like I mentioned before, they have experience going to Germany for in the draft. They have Seider already on their team, so there's some familiarity. And as Ranger fans, we need to understand this as well. If you draft players from Europe, you need to make sure that the environment that you're going to put them in North America is one where they feel at ease.
I completely agree.
I mean, you shouldn't base your entire draft strategy on this, but if you have a group of players that you consider to be equal, this can be one of the deciding factors. So if Ottawa passes on Tim Stützle, which is not out of the question, I think Detroit will jump on that opportunity. And
Okay.
with Jamie Drysdale at 3 from the OHL, it just makes sense. Jamie Drysdale on the right side on the blue line, and Shabbat on the left side is just the perfect combination for Ottawa going forward for the next decade. So they would just solidify their top pairing on the blue line by going with Drysdale. That's my way of thinking for this top 5.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, and that's completely fair. I personally would love to see Stützle go to Detroit for that Sider aspect, especially. I think that would be amazing. I've done that in previous mock drafts. People didn't love the aspect of me wanting to make sure Stützle dropped all the way down to Detroit each time, though. So I have mixed it around. But with the sake of this mock draft, that I have Stützle going to Ottawa at 4. Do you think a best fit for them would be basically a forward or a defenseman? Because if it's a forward for me, it's either Lucas Raymond or Marco Rossi. I personally don't like Cole Perfetti more than those other two, which is why I think he would be a good fit for them there.
Yeah. Forward is probably the way to go. And this has not necessarily everything to do with the need for the team, but just with how the draft plays out. And if you look at, for instance, goalies, you can get good goalies in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round. So it's not the best thing to do to pick a goalie early. With defensemen, it's slightly different, but still the same. You can get a good defenseman in the 2nd and 3rd round. So why would you use a really, really high pick on a defenseman? Where
Correct.
You can get a forward, and forwards are generally much harder to find later in the draft. So if you have really high picks, in my opinion, you always have to go with a forward unless there is that guy on the board that really stands out, like Rasmus Dahlin in 2018.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, you're completely right there, especially with forwards. Luckily, this year's draft is so deep when it comes to the forwards. But I guess for the sake of Detroit here, I have to pick a forward here. It's really hard for me to go up against Lucas Raymond, so I'm going to put him for Detroit. But I understand why he may fall out of the top 5. I get it. But like Raymond, when you look at his numbers, they are a little alarming if you aren't necessarily following him. Before this season, at least, he was playing absolute bottom feeder minutes, as you would know, in the SHL, and really took great advantage. He, in my mind, has some of the most potential out of this entire draft class. I think that he very well may fall out of the top 5. And even if he does, I think he could come out as, looking back when people do redrafts and stuff, he could easily be top 3 because the potential's there. His playmaking is fantastic. His goal scoring is there as well, which has been evident this early in the season for the SHL. His defensive game is a little bit lacking, and people question his work ethic. All those things factor in, I believe, which is what you may have been referring to. But I know for Raymond, at least last season, he had 10 points in 33 games. So not bad at all for a guy playing little to no minutes each and every night. And I know that this year is a different case, though.
Yeah, and if those red flags weren't there regarding Lucas Raymond, based on talent alone, he would be the 2nd best player in the draft, ahead of Quinton Byfield.
I think that is a very fair argument to be had for sure. Yeah, a lot of people like Raymond at 2, as it is. So, but next on now to the 5th pick for the Ottawa Centers, and I will hop on this with you. Personally, I would love to see Marco Rossi stay in Ottawa and then go with 2 forwards. It may not be as realistic per se, even though they do have a good defensive prospect pool as it is. I didn't recognize that originally when I first started doing mock drafts, and I did more research, and I came to a conclusion that, it won't be out of the realm of possibility if they go with 2 forwards, but it is very hard to pass up on one of Drysdale or Sanderson here at 5. So for me personally, I think it would make a lot of sense for Drysdale at 5. I'm not sure if you would agree.
Well, I have Drysdale already at 3, so at 5, I'm going with Marco Rossi.
Oh, okay. Okay. So then if that's the case, you think Drysdale falls out of the top 5, given how we have things currently?
You mean Raymond?
Oh, no. I put Raymond for Detroit.
Oh, no, on your mock. Okay.
Yes.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I could see Ottawa go with 2 forwards. If I was a GM, I would try to get a forward defenseman combo with 3 and 5, but you go with the players you're most comfortable with, of course. And in my mock, going with Drysdale and Rossi makes sense. In yours, Stützle, and then Rossi. I mean, it would be great for their offense, and defensively they still have Eric Brunstrom in the system. They have some good prospects coming up. So it's not really a necessity for them to go with a defenseman here. They can still get a really good defenseman with the third pick they have in the first round, the one they got in the Pajot trade. So going with 2 forwards at 3 at 5 is bold, but yeah, it's not crazy.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I'm gonna take Rossi at 5. I think it'd be awesome if he can stay in town too. Just make things a little bit easier on himself as well, transitioning in the NHL. But he is one of those guys I think is going to be almost surely NHL ready as soon as next season. I could be wrong on that, but he's done everything at the junior level at this point. 120 points in 56 games played in the OHL, over 80 assists. You know, I've talked about Rossi plenty and given him plenty praise. I think he may very well fall out of the top 5 because of his size. I hope that isn't the case. But I know how, especially when it comes to certain GMs and how they do their drafts, for whatever reason, if you're below 5'10", then oh boy, you know, Alex DeBrincat, Cole Caulfield, even though he wasn't a terrible pick, definitely should have been top 5 last year, in my opinion. And same thing with Braden Point, among others, you know, just smaller stature guys that have done it at every level. I think Rossi would make a lot of sense for the Sens, but so would a defenseman. So next now at number 6, we have the Anaheim Ducks. And how are you feeling for Anaheim here with the 2 defensemen still available? Obviously, Cole Perfetti's still there, Alexander Holtz, among others.
Anaheim is a team that historically does really well drafting defensemen. So I think they will count on that with their later picks. And again, at the top of the draft with this much talent up front, I see them going with a forward and the player that I've always paired with the Ducks, just because they just seem like a good fit, is Alexander Holtz.
Ooh, okay. All right. I will agree with you there. I haven't had Holtz not going to the Devils in every mock draft. I always had him a lock at 7. But given how I have things right now, that would make a lot of sense for Anaheim. They need the scoring, obviously. They have some strong prospects, including the likes of Trevor Zegras, correct? And they're going to continue to I'm not sure what direction they're going in per se. They have a lot of great defensemen on that blue line. I love Fowler, Lindholm, etc. But one of those 2 looks like they may be on the move sooner rather than later. So Anaheim should address that offense. I agree. So surprised to have Holtz at Anaheim. I wonder how Devils fans feel about this watching this. I'm not sure. But next now at 7 for the Devils. One more thing also about Holtz. He had 16 points in 35 games last season. Can't say the same for this year. I'm not sure what his statistics are, but he's another one who isn't playing a lot, at least from last season, and really taking advantage of the little opportunities he's had. One would debate without question the best goal scorer in this year's draft, or at least has the potential to be.
The best sniper, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And the season in Sweden only started like 2 weeks ago, so I wouldn't put too much weight on the performance early on. I think the decision in the draft will be based on what they have done in the last year or so.
Yeah, I agree.
And both Holtz and Raymond were, of course, huge for the under 20 and under 18 Sweden national team. But in the SHL, Holtz, in my opinion, has been the most impressive out of the 3 big Swedish forwards this draft.
Okay. Yeah, no, and that will definitely take your word with more than a grain of salt, because you've examined these guys firsthand more than I have, and Holtz has a lot of promise, and whoever's going to land him is definitely going to get a stud in the making. But next now at number 7, we have the Devils, obviously. The Devils, if they say lose out Holtz here at 7, you'd have to think that how do they not go with Cole Perfetti here? It would seem kind of baffling to me. Yes, they need defensive help too. I get it, but they need wingers. And while Perfetti isn't necessarily a straight up winger, you know, he's more known for being a center. He can play that left wing position. In my personal opinion, I think Perfetti would make the most sense here, given their options. How do you feel?
Yeah, this is the first team where I'm really starting to think, will they go with a goalie? Because, of course, you have Yaroslav Askarov, who has top 10 potential. The question is are the New Jersey Devils the team that's going for a goalie with a top 10 pick? Of course, they gave up a top 10 pick a few years ago to acquire Corey Schneider. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they've been in a position to really draft a goalie this high. Also, if they don't go for a goalie, do they really need another forward? Because they have been drafting pretty well. They added also Nikita Gusev
That's true.
It sounds like for me, it seems like they need either a goalie or help on the blue line.
Okay, and that's one of those things where like it's fun to have these conversations because I've been so locked into them getting a winner, and Holtz just having that guy that could really be their next big thing on goal scoring. Besides the Parises and the Kovalchuks of the world, I think he would make a lot of sense. But if he isn't available here, it really is a toss up because they need to address every position in this lineup. I think we can all agree. But when it comes to the goaltending, I'm not as committed with Askarov as others may be, just because I have been very impressed with Mackenzie Blackwood. And I think if you look at his numbers this past year, he was a really significant goaltender playing for a team that had a very subpar defense and offense in front of him. I wouldn't necessarily bail out Mackenzie yet, personally, but Askarov does have the potential to really be that franchise, that multiple Vezina Wayne caliber goaltender. So regardless of who they currently have in goaltending for most teams in the NHL, they're definitely scouting Askarov for sure.
Yeah, so for the Devils here at 7, I'm going for Askarov, which would be quite interesting because it would be another Russian goalie in the Metropolitan Division.
Okay, you know what? The fact that you said that just put a smile on my face. I plan on doing a video in the future because I'm just so ecstatic about this wave of Russian goaltenders in the Metro.
We had 2 Russian goaltenders in the Cup final this year.
I know, it was fantastic. They're just a different breed. It's hard to really explain, but when you look at the likes of not just Igor Shostorkin, Ilya Sorokin, also Samsonov for the Capitals, who is surely going to be that number 1 next year. Hope he's gone. We all know that. I like Samsonov a lot. I think he could really be something for the Caps. And then bring Askarov in the mix, and things are going to get very interesting in a couple of years. So I'm picking Askarov there as well.
Varlamov as well.
No, yeah, that's true. Varlamov had fantastic playoff. He had a couple games that looked a little so-so, but I think that was more so of him just being gassed than it was his actual play. He played fantastic.
And the Carolina Hurricanes have a Russian goalie prospect in the system.
Yes, they do. I'm blanking on his name, however. I'm not sure.
Korchechkov, I think.
Yeah.
So it could be really interesting 3-4 years from now, the Metropolitan Division.
Yeah, no, Askarov just looks like that guy.
Yeah, they can just play the Russian national anthem before they start the game with so many goals in it.
Askarov, as we mentioned, he's been fantastic, really, for a while now. Yes, he did play only a cup of coffee last season, at least, with SKA St. Petersburg in the cage. I think he only played 1 game, but he played around 18 games of the VHL. He had a goals allowed average, I think, of 2.45 and a save percentage of 920. He has looked stellar to start this year. I saw some big-time saves he's had in the KHL to start the season. I hope for his sake it doesn't take him long to come to the NHL because, that is always one of the bigger issues with players coming from Russia nonetheless. But Askarov, I will definitely take him at the Devils. First time I've done that in mock drafts. But next now at 8, the Buffalo Sabres. I want to say Cole Perfetti here. But at the same time, their center depth does look a lot better when you just look at it between that Eric Stahl deal and with the likes of Dylan Cousins coming into his own. I expect him to be in the league sooner rather than later. Would they commit to bringing in a guy like Perfetti as well? Actually, I just contradicted myself. I'm sorry to cut you off, but with all the Jack Eichel rumors happening and not certain how that future is going to go, Buffalo is really not looking good at the deadline. Eichel could be out by the time that no movement clause kicks in. And if that's the case, they're going to want to make sure they still have young talent that could go for them forward. So I have no clue to hear, perfectly honest with you. It could really go a lot of different ways.
Perfetti makes sense if they get rid of Eichel, but I don't see them trading Jack Eichel. There were rumors. Bob McKenzie tweeted something out a couple of days ago, but at the end of the day, Eichel didn't want to be traded, so I think he's going to be there for a couple more years. And you should never draft for immediate need, especially not when you get to like the bottom half of the top 10. Because those players usually need a year or 2 to get ready anyway.
Oh, correct.
Of course, in my mock, I still have Lucas Raymond on the board, who I'm going to pick here for Buffalo.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of people think Raymond is going to drop out of that top 5. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm gonna be a little disgruntled if it happens, just because I view very highly of Raymond. I understand the critics against him. I just think he has all the potential in the world, not to drag him down, drag along with him. But I guess here, given the options, because how I have it set up at least, Raymond is out of the equation. So would you still take Perfetti here at 8, or would you say go for someone else?
If Raymond is no longer there, I could see them go for Jack Quinn, who,
okay,
of course, played with Marco Rossi on the Ottawa team in the OHL.
Yep. Had over 50 goals this past year.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take you up on that with Jack Quinn.
And this is what scouts look at. Scouts are sometimes very conservative in the way they look at players. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it's sometimes their opinion differs from us fans because we look at it with different expectations. Also, our job is not on the line if we pick the wrong player. So
that's completely true.
Yeah, we as fans usually tend to take a little bit more of a risk because, hey, who cares?
Yeah.
If we're wrong, we're wrong. We'll do the same thing next year. It doesn't matter for us. But for them, their job's on the line. So I understand they're a little bit more cautious. And the more conservative stats like simple goals scored will come into the equation more frequently and faster when it comes to the actual draft. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go with Jack Quinn here to get some goal scoring added to the team.
Yeah, no, he had 89 points in just over 60 games. He's not a product of Rossi by any means. While he did play very well alongside him, Quinn has a very strong game, especially gaining the nitty gritty from everything that I've seen of him. He has more of a hard-nosed game as well as not afraid to defend his teammates by any means. He really will get the shot off anywhere in that offensive zone. It's not just like it needs to be a 1-2 with the right-hand shot and the left dot. That's not the case. Quinn, very interesting pick here for Buffalo. But now, for me, how I have it set up, we still have Jamie Drysdale available, getting to the 9th overall pick. I've never had him in my mock drafts go out of the top 10. So here we are at 9 with Minnesota. What are you thinking?
Minnesota is the easiest pick between 5 and 15 for me. Because Minnesota needs a center to replace Koivu. And a couple of years ago, they drafted Granlund. I mean, everything screams Anton Lundell for me here.
You would take Lundell over Perfetti?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I see.
So I personally have Perfetti in my top 5. So
okay.
Lundell. I personally have Lundell in my top 5.
Okay, I agree. I think from like an overall actual player standpoint, it's Lundell. I think Lundell has a very strong chance to go. I don't think he'll go top 5. I think it will be in the top 10 though. However, I would love it if the Rangers would be in a scenario to say trade with Buffalo at 8 to make it happen. Don't think it's going to happen, but it's just a fun thought to be had because of how much I love him as a prospect. But Lundell at 9, I'm all for it. And while I'm sure a lot of Wild fans would get, say, disgruntled going for him over Perfetti, given how superior, say, Perfetti is with his offensive game, I think Lundell's two-way game overall will make up for it. And Koivu, as we all know, is a prime example of being a fantastic two-way centerman in the NHL throughout his career. And it will be quite interesting, too, to have, their old captain, the longtime Finn, and bring in a new one. I think it would be quite the passing of the torch, if you will. So I like that idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next
we get to Winnipeg.
What's that?
Then we get to Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. All right, Winnipeg, and Jamie Drysdale still available. Perfetti's still available. Or Sanderson's still available. Winnipeg, you would think, would get Lundell. But how I have it set up for the people watching, that isn't happening. So my next pick for them would be Sanderson. But if Drysdale's available at 10, how do you not at the same time go for Drysdale? But Perfetti, they need a second-line centerman. What is the biggest priority for them here? Because they're losing more defensemen in free agency this year. And I know that you shouldn't necessarily draft based on need, but I know for a fact when it comes to Sanderson, he's one of the sure guys, in my opinion, to almost be a lock to be in the NHL as soon as next year. I don't know if he's committed to going to college, which could be a factor, but nonetheless, you would think Perfetti, it would kind of seem silly to not go with Perfetti here, but their defense needs to be addressed big time too.
Yeah, and I think going for a need and organizational need does play a factor to a certain degree, but more so in terms of the prospect pool, in my opinion. The Rangers, for instance, you can say they need a center, and I agree, but not because they need a center in the NHL. They just need centers in their prospect pool. And I think for Winnipeg, defense is probably their biggest need. Looking at the future, their forward core is still relatively young. With their wingers like Line and Connor and Ehlers, they don't have to worry about that for years. The center prospects that would have helped them out are not really there, aside from Perfetti, of course. But yeah, between Sanderson and Perfetti, I would go Sanderson.
Okay. See, this is I think a lot of Jets fans would be like, no way, Jose, that ain't happening. But Sanderson, I really thought it was between him and Lindell every day of the week. I debated so hard in my last mock draft as to who I thought would be the better fit. But I will take you with Sanderson here just because for so many reasons, it makes sense. And while they do need help at that center position, assuming this is how, say, the draft were to happen, because it definitely won't be, but if it did, they can definitely address that center position with other avenues. That is why they are actually listening to the likes of Patrick Laine, for instance, more than just defensive help. But if, say, they were to deal Laine, which doesn't seem likely, but if it were to happen, they aren't doing it for anything less than a complete haul that'll directly affect their lineup at that second line center position and the defenseman. That's why guys like, if you look at Columbus and the Flyers linked to them, when it comes to Columbus, you have Liam Foudy, who could very well be that next two-way second line center for them. For the Flyers, it could very well be Morgan Frost in the future, along with all these defensemen. So they have different avenues they can take, and Nikolai Ehlers as well, who I personally love, when it comes to addressing that center position. So I think Sanderson would be a very strong fit for them nonetheless. But next now, at number 11, the Nashville Predators. The Predators, last time I did a mock draft, I had the Preds gain Seth Jarvis. What are your thoughts? Jamie Drysdale's still available. Drysdale went above Sanderson. Oh my God.
Look, Seth Jarvis is probably one of the most popular prospects in the draft in terms of late risers because of what he did since New Year's. I think he had 62 points in 25 games in the WHL to end the season. He had a really strong finish, which for a lot of teams plays into their decision making as well. Teams like late risers, teams like players who perform better when the season's on the line. So when a player does well late in the season, that usually gets scouts very interested in players. And Seth Jarvis at 11 to Nashville does make a lot of sense. Is he really better than Drysdale or, in my mock, still Cole Perfetti? As much as I love Seth Jarvis, I would not take Jarvis over Perfetti.
Neither would I. And I agree with you there. But I'm just curious.
For me,
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
For me here at 11 for Nashville, it's Cole Perfetti.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm just like, I feel like I'm going to get a lot of hate in the comments from this video for having Drysdale available still. It just seems absurd. But this is the NHL draft at the end of the day. This is why these mock drafts are fun because, you know, we can throw hypotheticals all we want. We could have a perfect idea as to, oh, this guy's going to go top 5 or even top 3. And they drop out of the top 10. You know, it happens almost every year. It seems like there's always...
Players drop every year. 3 years ago, Klim Kostin was ranked the #1 European prospect, and he went 30th to the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, and I like him. I like him quite a bit. I'm curious what he's going to do because he hasn't really fully transitioned to the NHL yet, as we know. But you're completely right.
Fun fact, Elias Andersson in his draft year was ranked ahead of Miro Heiskanen.
That is, yeah, it's there's so many players. If we're talking, you know, about lists and who goes above where, I could have a field day with you regarding Craig Bunn, but we're not going to do that. No. Yeah, it is what it is. Things happen. Things don't pan out. You know, there are different reasoning as to why players are ranked the way they are between team need and, of course, how their actual performance is. I think a lot of people don't take into account necessarily progression and analytics because for me personally, I think you need both. The eye test is great, but I think you need both. I don't think you can have one or the other. And I think that's a bigger issue when it comes to scouting per se, or at least, certain analysts among others that really just look at that eye test, but they don't really take little to nothing else into account. But let's get now to the Florida Panthers. The Panthers, Jamie Drysdale. If Drysdale's still available, how do you not put Drysdale there? Yes, they're losing Evgeny Danilov, and yes, they're losing the likes of Mike Hoffman. Danilov might stay, but Hoffman's surely gone. But I think they have good winger depth. Owen Tippett and Denisenko may very well be in the lineup as soon as next year to fill those holes in that top 9. And they need help defensively. And Drysdale would be a great puck-moving defenseman. They could have Ekblad focus more on his defensive game in the coming years. So I have to go with Drysdale here. It would seem absurd not to at this point.
Yep. And perfectly understandable if he's there at 12. It makes sense for the Florida Panthers to go for Jamie Drysdale.
Yeah, and also to mention too, Perfetti, because I just didn't list it for anyone. He had 111 points in 64 games. So just so you guys know, last year, and Drysdale had 47 points in 49 games. He really looks like another winner out there, especially as a quarterback for the power play. He's a fantastic offensively minded defenseman and could very well go top 5 in this draft without question. That's why I've had him there for many of my mock drafts. But next now.
Hold on, because I already had Jamie Drysdale at 3, of course.
Oh, okay.
So for the Florida Panthers in my mock, I'm going with Hendrix Lapierre because the Florida Panthers really need some center depth with the possible departure of Alexander Barkov in a few years, and also the 2 Finnish kids they have in the system that haven't really panned out, Borgstrom and Heponiemi. I feel it makes sense for them to go with the center, and Hendrix Lapierre is the type of guy that if you want to overlook his injuries, then he is the guy to go for in terms of talent. Talent-wise, he should be top 10, maybe even top 5. But his concussions and neck injuries are some red flags that for some teams may be too much to overlook, but for a team like Florida, they just have to take a gamble here, and I feel that Hendrix Lapierre makes sense for them for their prospect pool.
And I completely agree. Lapierre is one of my more favorite prospects in this draft as well. I think from my last mock draft, I had Lapierre following the Rangers at 22. Was there a little bias there? Of course there was, but Lapierre is a guy who I very well think is going to fall in this year's first round given his injuries. I think it would be a different story if it was other draft years over the past 5 years, just because of how deep this one is offensively speaking. So teams know that they can get really many talents that are sure to be very solid top 6 winners or centermen in the NHL. And Lapierre, with that obvious red flag, he may very well even fall out of the first round. I hope it doesn't happen personally, but we've seen crazier things happen, especially when guys are dealing with injuries. So I respect that for sure.
We saw 2 years ago with Joe Veleno, who fell all the way to, I think, 29 to the Detroit Red Wings. He was projected to go like close to 10. And sometimes players fall for reasons that nobody can explain. It just happens. And in a draft this deep, probably the deepest draft since 2003, there's a chance at 16 and 17, you could get a player that in any other draft would be closer to 5th overall. So yeah, it makes sense for Lapierre to be 22nd or even to be 8th. It just depends on a team that's willing to bite and overlook the injuries.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Oh, I just saw a rumor mill. That's why I was like struck for a second. The Canucks possibly trading for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Nathan Gravity just came out with that. So I thought it was like an official trade. I almost had a heart attack. But nonetheless, let's get on to number 13. And we have the Carolina Hurricanes with the draft pick they got in that Patty Marleau trade, that cap dump, as we all know. Hurricanes, it would be Askarov if he was available here. But given the sake that we don't have him available, they could go many different routes here. I think it won't hurt them by any means by, say, going for a winner. I think I like Dylan Holloway more so because of just the fact that he is more NHL ready. He really can go anywhere between the 10 to towards the end of the first round. I really don't know what Carolina is going to do here with Askarov not available. So what are your thoughts?
Carolina is a team that really doesn't really have areas where they like to draft. They're very, they draft from all over the place. They draft from all different types of leagues. They drafted Aho from Finland. They drafted Svechnikov from, I think, the OHL. It doesn't really matter for them. Other teams like the Rangers are very comfortable drafting a player from Europe. The Ottawa Senators don't really draft from Europe, but with the Carolina Hurricanes, I really don't know. It's really hard to put my finger on it. But it's for me, it's between two players here for the Carolina Hurricanes because they both fit in my opinion, their need and their culture. Seth Jarvis or Noel Goodluck.
And if I have to pick between the two, I think Jarvis. Just because I know that there's a lot of controversy with Gunler as it is. A lot of potential. He's really, at least it comes off as very high risk, high reward. It's just a matter if you want to necessarily take that gamble on him. That's how a lot of scouts perceive him, at least from everything that I've read. But I would definitely take Jarvis here, and Carolina would get quite the steal as well. Because it's not necessarily that they need Jarvis right away because they're in this win now stage. So whenever he would be at the NHL level would bode them well because they would surely still be contending in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yep.
And Jarvis also, just want to mention one more thing regarding his statistics because I believe I have them in front of me. He had 98 points in 58 games played in the WHL, including 40 goals this past year. So yeah, he's definitely one of the better goal scorers in this year's draft. Next now at 14, Edmonton. Edmonton, they need wingers as well. In my opinion, it's Noel Gunler or Dawson Mercer. What's your thoughts?
Do you still have Jack Quinn on the board on your mock?
No, because Quinn was taken with Buffalo.
Okay. Because he's still available on my mock. So this is where things get a little bit interesting because we don't have the same players early on. So our boards of available players will look slightly different, of course. Yeah, a winger makes a lot of sense for Edmonton. Going with, that's tough. Of those, I'd probably go for Edmonton with Dawson Mercer.
Yeah, I like Mercer a lot. There's a lot of potential behind him. He's a little rough around the edges in some aspects of his game, but I think, he's only going to bode well along the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They do so well with pretty subpar winners around them. And now that they're finally getting things rolling with Kailer Yamamoto, who I absolutely love, I'm so happy to see him doing well for Edmonton in this past year. And they have plenty of other guys in that lineup too, but they definitely need more winger depth. So I completely agree with you. I would gladly take Dawson Mercer there for the Edmonton Oilers. And Mercer also had 60 points in 42 games this past season. Okay, next now at number 15. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No. Just moving on to the Toronto pick.
Okay, yeah, no, I apologize. I didn't clarify this further because I'm not screen sharing, so we do have kind of different lists. So that's why I'm basically, having your opinion, obviously, and then basically making my decision based off of both of our thoughts. So just want to clarify that if you didn't know. But now at 15 with Toronto and the Pittsburgh Penguins pick, in which the Penguins, Jim Rutherford, need I say more, that Kasperi Kapanen deal. What is Toronto doing at 15? I feel fairly confident I know what they're doing with a goaltender not available. It's Braden Schneider or bust, in my opinion.
Oh, I think they're going with a defenseman, but I think they're going to go with a defenseman from Russia here.
Oh, do you?
And this is probably my hottest take in this mock.
I'm all for
it. I think at 15 they go with Shakir Mukhamadullin. Yeah, it's a tough name.
I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Do you know where he is in Cap Friendly for me to click him, or his rank?
He's number 41.
41. Okay. All right. I'll take you. I'll gladly take you on that. I'm sure Leafs fans that are watching this are like, who in the hell is that? Would you like to expand on his game a little bit more for me? Because I do not have a great background on him.
Okay. He has been rising the last year. And he may not be on everyone's radar because he plays in Russia. Not every team scouts as heavily there. But I know the Toronto Maple Leafs do. So if there is a team in the first round that could go for this kid, it is Toronto. They have a need for the blue line. I mean, offensively, they're set for the next decade.
For sure.
They might want to move. They might want to implement some bottom six wingers, but I think defensively they have a much bigger need. And Luka Madulin is a defenseman who is good in his own zone, but his strength is his offense and his transition game.
Okay.
I think, if I remember correctly, he has 5 points in his first 11 games this season already. So he's really starting. He's starting off really hot this season. That might sway them a little bit more, but I think he's on the same in the same tier as other defensemen like Helge Grans, Braden Schneider, Caden Gooley, and Emil Andre.
Okay. Yeah, I like Emil Andre a lot from what I've seen. Gooley, very solid defenseman as well. Yeah, no, they could go. This would definitely be a hot take, a controversial one for most people that don't know who he is, which is definitely going to happen in this year's draft. I can't wait to see how this all breaks down. But okay, Shakir, it is at number 15. 16.
Yeah, I just quickly checked this for you, his stats, because I wanted to get it right.
Sure.
With Salafat Yulayev Ufa in the KHL, 1 goal, 4 assists in 11 games, and a +5 rating.
Okay, solid. Okay. And, as we know with Kyle Dubas, I hope it changes, but he hasn't really addressed the actual defensive side of the defense yet. He loves puck-moving defensemen, of course. I could very well see them make a big splash this offseason and really do something that will be jaw-dropping. But nonetheless, Shakir, from everything that you're telling me, it does seem like...
they've had some experience with Russian defensemen to varying degrees of success, but still, they don't hesitate going to that area of the world to get their players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, completely agree. Because was their last one Zaitsev?
Zaitsev, and there was another one. Something with an O. I would have to look it up.
Okay.
I cannot think of it right now. But they had a couple of Russian defensemen, and yeah, they may not all have worked out, but like I said, they feel comfortable going there. And of course, they signed Mikko Lehtinen from Jokerit, who plays in the KHL.
Fantastic.
So they are looking at the KHL, and this is a kid that I think can really jump into the first round where nobody is expecting it.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point to be had. I wasn't even thinking of Lehtinen originally. There was some connection that maybe you go with the Rangers. I remember you talking about it all those months ago. But
it was more wishful thinking and talking it to existence than anything else.
I mean, that's what we do as not just a Rangers fan base, but most hockey fan bases. You want to manifest it, hoping something comes out of it. There's been times where there has been, and other times where there hasn't. More often than not, it hasn't been, but it was still worth it at the end of the day. But next now,
it was fun while it lasted,
Yeah, no, it was. But next now at number 16, we have the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens, a lot of people think are going to go for a guy like Bork, for example. I don't think that would be the smartest route for them. They have center depth, as we all know. And while they are probably going to get rid of at least one of Domi and Deneau this offseason, I don't love the idea of them acquiring a center per se. I picked Noel Gunler, honestly, last time, because I think Gunler is a guy that they could take a shot at 16 and really could benefit from greatly in the end, as they need winger depth, especially on that. He plays both left and right wing, but on that right side, especially given how things currently are, if they say don't go for a big fish in free agency, which I think Bergevin is bluffing to an extent, I think a guy like Gunler would make a lot of sense for them. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, from a talent standpoint, he does make sense for them. They have drafted from European leagues in the past, so it's not completely out of the blue if they go this route. And yeah, I think winger is probably the one position they should go for. On my board, Dawson Mercer is still available.
So you're taking Mercer there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it may sound like a little bit of a lazy pick because it's the Canadiens and they're going with a player from the queue, but more often than not, that is the case with them. I mean, they love their francophones, so to speak.
Yeah, it's true. Like I said, it might be a little bit more of a reach here with Gunler, but I do think Gunler will kind of fall right in the middle of the pack of that first round, if not towards the mid 20s. So I'm gonna take Gunler here, but when it comes to him, Jarvis and Mercer, they really are three peas in a pod. It's very it is rather up in the air as to where they will land in this year's draft because I obviously don't know how each team is intensively scouting these winners. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there.
Yep.
But next now it's 17. The Chicago Blackhawks, assuming they don't trade up for Askarov, which is what everyone seems to want to happen for quite some time because they originally wanted the Blackhawks to get Askarov. It makes perfect sense, but he's not available here. I'm not sure if he will be available for the Hawks and when draft day actually happens. But the Blackhawks are a team where they could go down a couple different avenues, but I think a guy like Maverick Bourque now isn't too out of the realm of possibility in my mind. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Maverick Bourque makes sense. I think what they're looking to bolster is mostly their scoring, their forwards. So yeah, of course, defensively, the last couple of years they have drafted some defensemen. Yoki Haru, who they then traded, of course, to Buffalo. But the player that I really like here for Chicago is Jan Mishak.
I've heard a lot of good things about him.
Yeah, I heard Canadians pronounce his name as Jan Mysak.
Yeah, that's how I would if I didn't know any better.
So just so everyone's aware of which player I'm talking about, it's Jan Mysak, but his name is pronounced Mishak. Started in the Czech League last year. Mid-season, moved to the OHL to the Hamilton Bulldogs, and he didn't miss a step. He adjusted in like a fraction of a second. Played really well in the OHL, and he's just an electrifying player. And if you can get him at 17, I think the Chicago Blackhawks are comfortable taking a guy like Mishak. They like their European players. They sometimes get him through free agency, like Pius Suter, the Swiss guy that they signed this summer. Of course, they have Kubalik already on their team.
Yeah, I love Dominic Kubalik.
And I think Mishak. Yeah, and they got him for a 5th-round pick in a trade with LA. It's so weird. Then he finished 3rd in Calder voting. But yeah, Jan Mishak makes a lot of sense for me here for the Chicago Blackhawks.
Okay, and I'll gladly take you up on that too, because when it gets in the latter part of this first round, which is what we are reaching upon, things can really go anywhere. Most people say that for all of the NHL draft, but I think we have a very solid idea as to, for the most part, what players will be relative in the top 10. So once we get to this part, anything can really happen. And Mishak, I have heard a lot of great things, especially over this past 2 months about him. So Chicago would be a very strong fit for him. But next now, at number 18, the New Jersey Devils. They got to go with a defenseman here, considering they didn't go for a defenseman here originally with Askarov. A forward would make sense too, but they do have 2 first-round picks here. They, of course, have the 18th, which is what I'm currently at. Then they have the 20th. So which one would they value more here in that sense? If it's a defenseman in my mind, I think Caden Gooley or Braden Schneider, one of those two, would seemingly go there. If it's a forward, I think Rodion Amirov is a guy who the Devils may very well inquire on at one of those picks.
Defensively, I think Braden Schneider makes a lot of sense for the position he plays. It's a toss-up between Braden Schneider and Caden Gooley for me. I like Schneider a little bit more, so I'll give him the nod here. And I think they'll go with a forward at 20.
So do I.
We'll get there after the Calgary pick.
Okay, but Schneider is very solid defenseman who actually would fit great with Toronto if they say do go for him, just because he has more of a defensive mind. You can put up the points, however, he has 42 points in this past year in just around 60 games. So Schneider is a very solid defenseman. Game slept on a little bit because this is not a defensively heavy draft by any means. As we all know, it's pretty weak in that aspect versus the offense. But next now, at number 9, the Calgary Flames. The Flames here, given my players available, including the likes of Dylan Holloway, Connor Zary, Hendricks Lapierre. The list goes on, and even Maverick Bourque, because I didn't have him selected either, I believe. Calgary is a team where I've really had them kind of going for any type of forward, especially a centerman. So really, it's a toss-up for me between the likes of Zary or even Holloway, especially Holloway, just because I know he can be in the NHL sooner rather than later, whereas Zary probably needs a couple more years of seasoning, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Amirov earlier. I think the Calgary Flames might go with him here.
Okay.
I know he's played left wing in the KHL, but he has played center throughout his career in the last couple of years. He definitely has the ability to play center in the NHL. And the Calgary Flames are not in a rush. So getting a player who's playing in Russia for 2, 3, 4 years, like Tarasenko and Kuznetsov did, the Calgary Flames have time to just wait for Amirov to cook, to simmer a little bit in the KHL, and then come over when he's ready. They don't really need a guy who's ready now, because I think the Calgary Flames are going through a quick retool in the next couple of years.
I agree. I completely agree with that. I think that they're going to try to mix things up. I think that it seems that there is a possibility, as long as they don't have a huge run then next year. If they have another disappointing year, then I find it hard pressed to say that one of Gaudreau or Monahan will not be on their way out. Not saying that they will both be gone, but I think one of those two could definitely be subject to really a retool, just more so because of mixing things up versus their actual performance per se. So I agree with you there. But yeah, I will gladly take Amirov here. I had him going to the Devils, literally the next pick. So I'm not far off as to where he may very well end up. But now that the Devils have the Canucks pick, of course, in the Tampa Bay Lightning trade, I believe, what is going to happen here? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Was it? Yeah, it was the Tampa Bay Lightning trade. The Coleman trade.
The pick went to Tampa Bay for JT Miller and then to New Jersey for Blake Coleman.
Yep, and I think one of the Foote brothers was part of that deal as well.
Nolan Foote, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Devils here at 20. They're going to go with offense. They haven't addressed... See, I'd find it very hard pressed to say that they won't address the offense yet in the first round, which makes this very tough. But I think when it comes to more long-term potential, it would be pretty hard pressed for me to go up against the likes of one of Bourque or Zary. Holloway is very solid as well, but I think they want a guy that maybe has some more ceiling or potential. And I'm not sure exactly how much potential there is with Holloway. Holloway, in my mind, is going to be a very solid top 9 winger / center. But I don't know how much top 6 potential I see with him at this point in time, at least.
I think Holloway has top 6 potential. I just think that his situation is different from a lot of other players who get drafted. He's playing college in his draft year. So yeah, his numbers don't look that great, but we have to understand that this was his draft year and not the year after he was drafted. You have guys like Chris Kreider, Kevin Hayes. They all play in prep league in their draft year and then go to college after they are drafted.
Correct.
So when it comes to Dylan Holloway, the talent is there. He started really strong early on. He did play on a Wisconsin team that had a lot of issues. Those issues affected Alex Turcotte, Cole Caulfield, and Keandre Miller as well.
Yeah, they looked like a superstar roster on paper, but things did just not go as planned this past year.
And as a team, they imploded. So it's not like Dylan Holloway was struggling on a well-oiled machine that just ran through the league and racked up the points. So I wouldn't really use that against him. I think the Devils would go with Holloway here if he is still available. He's going to be in college for maximum 3 more years, which gives them a little bit of a shorter timeline than normal college kids. I don't think that's something that really changes their mind, but it is something worth mentioning. Because players who get drafted and go to college, their rights are retained until they graduate. And normally that's 4 years, but in Holloway's case, that will only be 3 years.
Yeah, that's assuming that he's there throughout the entirety, you know.
He could go pro after his sophomore or junior year, of course.
Yeah. I'll take your pick here at Holloway. Holloway's one who, as you mentioned, he can have some top six potential. I guess I just am not as committed on him for the Devils in this situation, but I think a fair notion to make is that Holloway does play the wing versus some of the other guys I mentioned. They are more sound with the center position, and that is not something that the Devils are trying to address, as we all know. So I think that winner aspect definitely kicked in, and I was really thinking about that more as you were discussing him. But when it comes to the college aspect, I don't think that downs him at all. When you look at Holloway's stats, he had a very strong. He had 17 points in 35 games, and nothing stellar, but nothing bad at the same time. He's a very strong two-way, and the Devils need help in all aspects of their game, and you have to address the defense more than just the defense itself. So that is another aspect to take into consideration.
Yep.
But next now at number 21, the Columbus Blue Jackets, who in my opinion would be a perfect fit for Holloway if they could land him there. But because that isn't the case here, who's it going to be?
It looks like you're one off with some players, like one spot off.
Yeah, that's how it feels, honestly. But this is the draft; anything can happen.
And this is probably what it feels like for scouts on draft day. They go, there goes our player, like one pick before they are on the clock.
The Rangers, they wanted Pettersson. Like we know this, So
if there's one thing I've learned over the years is that the Rangers are good at identifying the talent. They just weren't always able to get there to draft that talent. I know last year they were really high on Trevor Zegras, but then they won the lottery and that went out the window.
Yeah.
And then there was the case that there was the rumor that McDonough was going to get traded to Edmonton for the 4th overall pick. But then Columbus picked Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then that left Puljujarvi on the board. And then Edmonton pulled back out of that trade, and they drafted Puljujarvi instead.
Yeah, look what's
But
happening.
The Rangers were actually interested in Clayton Keller there. So
I've heard rumors that Keller could be on the move. I don't think it's happening. I think Arizona would be foolish to do that. But if the opportunity presents itself, by all means, I would gladly pick up that rumor mill with the Rangers. I love Clayton Keller. But I think.
All right, but at 21, for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I do let the torch factor play, affect my decision a little bit here.
Yeah, a little bit. I agree.
And they go with Ridley Greg. I don't know how you pronounce it in Canada.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, the left winger. Yes, he's one of those that I have not scouted too much.
I mean, he's the player that, in my opinion, really personifies what Tortorella wants from his team.
Okay.
And I don't know to what degree head coaches are involved in the decision making, but they are at the table on draft day.
Correct.
So they do have a voice. He played for the Brandon Wheat Kings, had 60 points in 56 games. But the physicality he brings to his game, I think that's what puts him over the edge for Columbus at 21.
Okay, yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, he's another guy that I do need a deep dive for sure. I have not seen much of him versus other prospects on this list, but I will take your word for it. Next now, the New York Rangers, the pick that they surely are not going to have, but for the sake of doing this mock draft, who do you think they're going with at 22? In my opinion, this is all biasly saying I would love Hendrix Lapierre, but that's just my personal opinion, nothing more.
Based on talent alone, Hendrix Lapierre at 22 would be a steal.
For sure. His two-way game is phenomenal as well, and that's something the Rangers need. They need help on that penalty kill as well. Nothing against Brett Howden, right? But they could definitely use an upgrade there on that PK. And to bring in a guy like Lapierre, he has the potential to be that top 6 centerman as well going down the road. So, but expand on him more.
I think we're going to get a two-way center with the 22nd overall pick. I just think it's going to be in a trade, not in the draft. But
that's very fair.
But in the draft, if they keep the pick, there's no way they're going to go for a defenseman or a goalie. There's just no way.
For sure.
There's no way. So it's going to be a forward. Whether they go with a winger or a center, it doesn't really matter because in their prospect pool, they need both. Their prospect pool when it comes to centers is basically Carl Henriksen and Adam Edstrom in Sweden.
Yeah, that's it right now.
Now that they signed Barron, those are the only unsigned prospects they still have.
Mm-hmm.
Wingers, they have Levi Aaltonen, who's not bad, but long shot prospects. Same with Eric Ciccolini. They're just so deep on defense that they sort of neglected drafting their forwards. And with Kravtsov now in the KHL, already under contract, of course they signed some undrafted free agents in Patrick Kodorenko, who is was one of my favorite prospects a few years ago. So I'm thrilled that they signed him.
Oh, nice.
Justin Richards is underrated. I think both Kodorenko and Richards have a chance to make the team.
I agree. I think that they're going to let the Greg McKeggs in
a bottom six role. They're going to at least fight for a spot.
Yeah.
So they need a forward, and whether they go with a winger or a center, to me, it doesn't really matter. On my board, Noel Gunler is still there, who I would love at 22. I know the Rangers have seen more of him than other teams. I go back and forth on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. If you see a player more often than others, do you tend to overlook the bad things, or do you tend to zoom in on the bad things because you see it happen more frequently?
Yeah, that's a very good argument to be had. It could if depending on how heavily they are showing interest of him or scouting him, the only worry you could really see is them possibly having a closed-mindedness with, say, some other players that could very well go around that area.
What does speak in Gunler's favor in terms of the Rangers possibly drafting him is that the Rangers have ties to his team Luleå because he plays with Nils Lundqvist. So the Rangers are in contact with their coaching staff, so they will have gotten the coaching staff's input in a more detailed way. And I know personally, from first-hand experience, that the Luleå coaching staff is very positive about Gunler, and they have brushed off the concerns that have been floating around Gunler. There are concerns that he is maybe lazy or disinterested. And to a degree, that was true when he was playing in junior hockey in Sweden, but that was just because he was out of that. He outclassed that league. He didn't have to put in 50% of the effort to dominate games. Same with Lucas Raymond and Alexander Holtz.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree.
But looking at Gunler in the SHL, he averaged last season, I think, 14 minutes a game. There were some games where he played 18 or 19 in the Champions Hockey League. He's a really good player, has a really good shot, not a hard shot, but a good placed shot. And in my opinion, the way he causes turnovers by just fighting for the puck is something that translates really well to the NHL. It's something that usually is done in the smaller areas, which on the NHL rinks tends to happen more often. He doesn't mind going into the dirty areas to throw out a hit. And that's just something that I think sets Noel Gunler apart from Lucas Raymond, of course. Lucas Raymond is much more talented and should go top 10. But Noel Gunler does things that Lucas Raymond should actually be doing and could make Lucas Raymond a top 3 pick. The Rangers just need forwards, and Noel Gunler is a guy that I would love there. If he's not on the board, Rodion Amirov is probably someone on their list. I know they've been scouting in Germany, so the 2 German kids, Peterka and Reichel, are a possibility.
Yeah, Reichel's
We're getting to an area where you can make a case for 10, 12, 15 players here. It gets really difficult to pinpoint that one player. But I'm going to go with, because he's still on my board, I'm going to go with Gunler here. But if he was not on the board, I think the player I would go with is Marat Kusnudinov, the center from SKA in Russia.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on him in a second because I have the Rangers still gain Lapierre. I think that is a gamble that they would be worth taking in the end, given how much potential he does have in pure talent. It's all just a matter of staying healthy. He had 19 points in 17 points, I should say, in 19 games this past year. So if he can stay healthy, then I think that is a win-win for the Rangers. I don't think they'll even have this pick, but just for the sake of this mock draft and considering it, Gunler, if he does fall, however, would be great. You know, it never hurts to have more Swedes for the New York Rangers. They normally tend to bode well. The Rangers have had a history for quite some time, and a very good one nonetheless, with their prospect pool and the guys in the roster. So Hendricks Lapierre I'm picking, but I completely agree. If Gunler is available, then I would love him. But next now, for the Philadelphia Flyers at 23. The Flyers are very interesting because now we get to the point where I've never done a mock draft before, from 23 to 31. This is all new to me. So I won't try to make it too long going forward just because of time constraints. But I guess when it comes to the Flyers, maybe they would be willing to draft a centerman if they were to put Morgan Frost in play for a deal, because there is rumors that they are very well going to try to get quite the top 6 forward in this offseason.
Yeah, center. Again, there's so many available here. You have Jacob Perreault, who we haven't talked about yet, who's probably he's projected to go in the 20s. Connor Zary, who's still on the board here, who has his flaws, but when you get to the 20s, you as a team you tend to overlook those flaws because you just go with upside there.
Correct.
I think Connor Zary, 6 foot, 181, plays in the WHL. I think Connor Zary would be the pick here for Philly.
Okay, yeah, and I completely agree. I think they very well could end up, assuming they don't trade their first round pick, I think they could very well draft essentially a replacement for the likes of Morgan Frost, because not that they want to deal Morgan Frost, but if they are going for a bigger fish this offseason, they have to free up cap space too in the process. That's why Goss is spare and JVR are 2 contracts they would love to get rid of. But in a win scenario where they really lock a controllable forward in that top 6, Frost could very well go the other way. So I think that's a factor that I've just honestly taken into consideration. Not saying it's going to happen or anything, but just something to be noted. Zary, of course, had 86 points in 57 games in the WHL, so very solid centerman nonetheless. Next now at 24, we have the Washington Capitals. The Caps are a team where they aren't getting any younger. We all know this. They're losing Holtby, their franchise goaltender, but I love Samsonov. I don't think it's going to hurt them in the end, assuming Holtby walks. But I think when I look at this team, they could definitely use some help on this defense. Their defense does not look nearly as strong, especially over these past couple years, than it has in the years prior. When it comes to their prospect pool, I am not as familiar as, say, a diehard Capitals fan would be. So I could be corrected here, but I think a defenseman would be a realistic possibility for them.
Yeah, defenseman makes sense for the Washington Capitals, and the Capitals are one of those teams that always tend to do well in the later parts of the first round.
Yep.
They got Marcus. Sorry.
Were you gonna say, is it McMichael?
Yeah, Connor McMichael, but in earlier years as well, like Kuznetsov, Marcus Johansson, they've had some really good picks late in the first round. And if they're going to look at bolstering their blue line, for me, William Wallinder from Sweden, 6'4", 192, left-handed defenseman. It makes a lot of sense if that's what they want to go for. If they want to go for that strong defenseman that can push people off the puck.
Yeah, I agree. While a lot of people have William higher on their list as well, so I might be curious to see where exactly he lands, if in the first round at all. But, I think that's a very solid choice for the Caps there at 24. Next now at 25, it's going to be a good pick either way. As long as the Avs keep that pick, Joe Sakic is a genius. I fully trust in whatever decision he makes here. It's just a question of what is it going to be. The Avs, really, it would be a scenario where it wouldn't seem out of the realm possibility to go for a goaltender, but I'm not really sure how other goaltenders would fare, and they definitely wouldn't be first round worthy. So with that taken into mind, I really don't know when it comes to the Avs. They're a team that they're just so balanced. They're so deep offensively. But they very well could address the offense some more here, given the players available at 25, at least from my list. What do you think?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not that much of a fan of Joe Sakic drafting outside of the top 10.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
The last player that played 100 games for the Avalanche that was drafted outside the top 10 was Tyson Barrie, who they drafted in 2009. Just
Yeah.
FYI.
hmm And
So it's
and
been a while.
Sakic, was he? I don't believe he was the GM then, or was he?
Probably not, but
Okay.
the Colorado Avalanche have not drafted a real contributor in outside the top 10 in over a decade. Of course, they've had McKinnon and Landeskog and Makar and Rantanen, which is all great, but top 10 picks tend to be a little bit easier than all the other picks in the draft. Um,
What about
I
Alex
think
Newhook? Not to cut you off. Where was he drafted?
Alex Newhook had a good season, but he has not done anything in the NHL yet. I mean, he could be the one to break that mold.
I think he
But
very well could be.
I mean, yeah, but you never know. You never know what's going to happen between now and 2024. So,
I can't blame you there.
but yeah, well, what are they going for? They went with Makar and Bowen Byram the last couple of years. Of course, Newhook you just mentioned. They added him. Uh, yeah, they could go either way. Um, Drafting forwards just to to stay ahead of the curve, so to speak, where they have to let players go. With the cap space, I think that they'll address the defensive needs more than the needed forward. So for me, Maverick Bork,
I was just going to say him.
Maverick Bork, Jacob Perreault, Thomas Bordelot makes sense here. Yeah, I think Maverick Bork is probably the best forward still available here. Although the two German kids, Reichel and Peterka, are probably also in the conversation here.
I think Reichel for St. Louis would make a very realistic sense, even with them losing the likes of Pietrangelo.
Yeah, and again, and I don't want to harp on this too much because it might seem like I use it as a cop out or as what I base everything on. But the St. Louis Blues a couple of years ago drafted Dominic Bock, who then they traded to the Carolina Hurricanes. So
Yeah.
they have gone that route before, where they draft someone from the German league. So the precedent is there.
Yeah, so I agree with Bork at 25. He had over 70 points in just around 50 games this past year in juniors. Very solid, could very well be a steal at 25 as well. And for St. Louis, I think, like I said, I think Reichel will be in the first round. Some people think he might even be close to top 10. I'm not really sure how confident I feel in that. They love his performance thus far this year. But regardless, I think he will be in the first round. I think St. Louis will take a bargain on him. They want to address that winger depth going forward. So I will take Reichel 26 for me personally.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds good for me. Yeah. And then next is the Anaheim Ducks again.
Yes. And the Boston Bruins trade.
That was Kashe, the Kashe trade, I think.
Yes.
Andre Kashe. Again, Anaheim doesn't really seem like the team for me that goes with a defenseman here because defensively, they always seem to find their defenseman later in the draft.
I agree. I think they're definitely going to go for a forward here and really a centerman too. It's hard to go, Marat is still available for me here. Same thing with the likes of Perreault. And even a lot of people like Brendan Brisson. And he's one who I really haven't scouted as much. So I do think he very well could land in the first round, the latter half. Is he a guy that Anaheim might go for given his versatility too? Yeah, I think that is something to consider.
Brendan Brisson, yeah, it's definitely an option for them. Yeah, I'm just going through the other players to see if there's someone who really stands out for me for Edmonton, but maybe Antonio Stranges.
That's true. He's a very solid prospect as well.
Is a little bit more of a high risk player, but I think Anaheim already having that top 10 pick, they can afford to take a little bit of a risk here. Okay. So that's interesting what they might do here. So I think I'll go with Antonio Stranges here. This is a guy who was actually ranked in the top 10 about a year ago, and his performance didn't really meet expectations. So he dropped out of the first round, closer to second, third round now. But the talent has always been there. So for a team that already had a top 10 pick where they got their surefire star in Alexander Holtz, it makes sense for Anaheim to go with a boom or bust player here instead of going for the safer pick.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely is a very good argument to be had, and I'm all with you on, honestly, because when you reach the end of this first round too, everything is so up in the air. I'm just trying to find where he is exactly. Do you know what number he was when you looked for him?
Oh, that's a good one. In the 40s, I think.
Okay.
42, maybe.
Yes. Okay. Here we go. Antonio. All right. Anaheim. Antonio with the 27th overall pick. Now to the 28th overall pick with the Senators getting that Islanders pick in that JG Pageau trade, obviously, as we mentioned earlier in the video. The Sens here, they could go plenty of other options as well. This is a pick that would not be out of the realm of possibility in my mind to see them trade for a roster player for next season. I think a lot of cards are on the table for Ottawa after they get rid of they're done with 3 and 5. So assuming they do keep the pick, however, I think there is definitely a good argument to be had with really anyone. Like, honestly, the defense would make sense, but they do have a good defensive prospect pool. Their center depth is huge, so I think they would address the wing if they do keep this pick.
Yeah, for me, it's wing or defense. And again, Brandon Brisson is a player that does make sense here for the Ottawa Senators.
And that's what I'm thinking personally.
Yeah, there's a player from Sweden who plays for HV71, Zion Niebeck, who I think should go higher than 28, but he's only 5'8". According to some reports, he's 5'6", but I'll trust the reports of the team that he actually plays for. He's 5'8", so he's very small, and some teams might not feel comfortable. But again, this is a team that had even 2 picks in the top 10, even in the top 5. This is a team that wouldn't mind taking a little bit of a risk here on a player that, worst case scenario, might never play in the NHL. So Zion Niebeck for me makes sense here. If they want to go for a defenseman, Caden Gooley is still there. Helge Grans is a defenseman that they could go for. A big guy from Sweden, right-handed defenseman, 6'3". Yeah, for me, it's between those two, unless they go for Gooley on defense. So I think I'm going to go for Niebeck here, right winger. Add some spark and some raw talent to their forward core.
Okay. All right. And next now to the Vegas Golden Knights. They're addressing defense. I think if there's one thing that they could definitely use help on is why they are really interested in the likes of Alexander Pietrangelo as it is especially that right side defense. And Justin Barron is still available here. Personally, I like Caden Gooley more between the two, just from the knowledge that I currently have of them. But Gooley being a left-handed shot as well, I think Barron would be a very sensible pick for Vegas, and really not reading too deep into this later round selection.
Yeah, and Barron makes sense for them if they are willing to overlook the injury history. Mm-hmm. I think he had surgery this week or last week again.
Yeah, I believe you're right. And they've done that in the past with Peyton Krebs. They're willing to take risks on their prospects.
That's a really good point. Peyton Krebs had some injury issues, and the Vegas Golden Knights overlooked it, and they just went for it. They went with their guy. Of course, they picked Cody Glass 3 years ago, who had his fair share of injuries. Yeah, the Vegas Golden Knights, it's like they cannot do anything wrong. Every decision they make, it pays off. They have not won a cup yet, but they made it to the cup final year 1. They made it to the conference final year 3. I don't think the Vegas Golden Knights are going to worry too much about the injuries with Justin Barron, and just go for the upside here.
Yeah, I completely agree. But here we go, the last 2 picks. We're reaching the home stretch. This has been awesome. So now at number 3, we have the Dallas Stars. Stars, they just lost Stanley Cup Finals, as we all know. A very impressive run nonetheless, and they need to address that offense. No doubt about it. Between the likes of Marat and Perot would make sense. They've had their history with Russians, not to just point that out per se, but I do feel that they would have a comfortability there going with Marat should he be available at 30. So I between the two, I would pick Marat over Perot.
Yeah, and if they go with a forward, Marat Kuznetsov makes a lot of sense. They, of course, have experience with Russians. They have Rajulov on the team, who, by the way, just for a quick second,
go for it.
Alexander Rajulov has the most Russian face out of all the Russian players in the NHL.
I completely agree. At least from what you see from an NHL perspective, he's like textbook. He needs to be on a magazine for what it means to be a Russian hockey player in the NHL. He really stands out.
If they have a movie about a Russian cab driver, then he can audition for it and he'll get it. Even if he cannot act. He has like the look, like perfect. With the Dallas Stars, do you think there's a chance they'll go with defense here?
I want to say no, just because of where they currently are as a team. Their defense, yes, when you look at that third line pairing, they could use some depth there going forward. I'm not too familiar with their prospect pool when it comes to the defensive side of things, so I could be wrong there to an extent, but this is something that they can address in these next couple off seasons, at least for more shorter term contracts for defensemen that will be strong placeholders at least until they really feel more confident in that bottom pairing. Like I said, for me personally, I think offense just makes too much sense for them. Not just with the likes of Rajulov, obviously, but Guryanov, phenomenal rookie year for him. Crucial part to their offense going forward. And it doesn't hurt to have more common intellect in the locker room to really bode well with this core group that very well could have some more deep playoff runs in the future. I think a retool is ahead of them sooner rather than later, given the age in a lot of this roster, at least their top guys. But nonetheless, I'm still going to feel fairly confident that they would go with offense. But that's just my personal opinion.
It's possible, but of course they have Thomas Harley in their organization on defense.
Yep.
I don't think they'll go with a goalie because honestly, for the Dallas Stars, it doesn't matter who's in goal for them; it works.
Correct, unless it's Jack Campbell.
Unless it's Jack Campbell, but they have Ben Bishop on the books for another 3 years, and he didn't play, and all of a sudden they make it to the Cup final. So goaltending is they're not going to focus on that. They have Jake Oettinger as well, the 21-year-old, who I think played for Boston University.
Yes.
In college. The former team, of course, of Rangers head coach David Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
On defense they have Thomas Harley, and offensively they have some more guys. They have Joel Kiviranta, who really had his coming out party this postseason, of course, together with Guryanov, who you mentioned. They have Ty Dellandrea. So they have a little bit more on offense, in my opinion, than they have on defense. But either way, they can go either way. They can go defense, they can go offense. I'm going to go with another reach here. I think they're going to go with a defenseman, and this is going to shock some people, I think. But I'm going with a guy called Emil Viro.
Okay.
He's a Finnish defenseman.
Where is he ranked?
I was going to tell you that now, so you can find him. He's 65.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that is quite the reach. But hey, this is the NHL draft.
Just so you can find him in the cap-friendly tool, Emil Viro plays for TPS, a really good defenseman, played in Liga. He played in the Spengler Cup last year with TPS as well. Played 29 games in the Finnish league. He was just, for such a young defenseman to play that many games in the Finnish league, he reminded me a little bit of Sami Vatanen, the way he played.
Okay. Not
necessarily the points he put up, but how comfortable and calm he was on the ice.
Okay.
And that is, for me, would be an interesting pick for Dallas. He would fit right in with the other Finnish guys. Of course, Heiskanen, Lindell, Kiviranta. So like my explanation with Stutzle to the Detroit Red Wings, he would come into an environment where he has some familiarity to take away the biggest challenges.
Very, very solid point. I will definitely do my homework on him nonetheless. So, yeah, I'm taking Marat there at 30 still. But now we are at the last pick, obviously, and the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Stanley Cup champions. They can go a lot of different routes here. I still have Perot available, Poirier, Goulet. To an extent, I almost feel like it wouldn't hurt them to possibly go with a defenseman in the situation that they say lose a Sergachev, or they don't keep Ryan McDonough his entire contract, because they're locked on a lot of big contracts as it is. I expect them to make moves this offseason, obviously, to try to free up that cap space. But
but hold on, the pick belongs to San Jose here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. I completely, because of Barclay Goodrow. Pardon me, people watching this. No. Now that San Jose, that completely changes the game. San Jose, they could address any area, defense or offense. Defensively speaking, they aren't getting any better. Brett Burns is very overrated, in my opinion, when it comes to his actual defensive game. When you look offensively speaking, they are struggling with their depth, no question. So would they prefer to have a guy that could be in the lineup sooner rather than later, or would they like to address that defense more? I think either way, they're not going to be losers in this situation.
Well, the problem with their defense is that Brent Burns is on the books for another 5 years.
Yep, same thing. Vlasic is on for
Vlasic for another 6. Carlson for another 7, I think. So even if they want to replace them, it's not that easy. They have Radim Simek on the books for $2.2 million. It's not much, but it's a contract for 4 years.
Yeah.
So of course, if you're going for defense to address a need in your in your organization, that makes a lot of sense. That player is not going to replace Brent Burns or Erik Karlsson anytime soon, unfortunately. I am happy for the San Jose Sharks that they were able to get a first-round pick after trading away a top 3 pick. Defense or offense, it's. I mean, I'm quickly going over because I'm not that familiar with the San Jose depth chart, so to speak.
I think they'd have to favor offense here, because the future of the likes of the Thomas Hurdles of the world, and even to an extent Timo Meier is rather uncertain. I'm not sure what direction San Jose and Doug Wilson is going to be going in next year and in the coming years. And you can also look at why am I blanking on his name? LeBanc as well, who banked on himself.
Yeah.
He could have definitely gotten a better deal with a different team. He said no. Unfortunately for his case, it didn't help his cause too much.
He bet on himself, and then a pandemic happened. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. I agree.
Yeah, they could go either way. I would go with Marat Kuznetsov if he's still on the board here at 31 for them.
Okay, all right. If that's the case, then I'm probably going to go with Jacob Perot, because I have Marat already taken. Okay, but I think that's done it. I don't even know how long this thing has been going on, but this has been awesome. I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts, especially. And if you'd like to give a quick tidbit as to who do you envision maybe the most surprise guy to go in the first round, who do you think it would be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm going to go with a guy that I talk about a lot, and my followers on Twitter probably are getting tired of me mentioning his name, but it's a defenseman from the U.S. National Team Development Program. His name is Eamon Powell. He's been jumping up the rankings this season. He wasn't really ranked that high at the start of the season, but then he just started playing, and people started to notice him, and then he was ranked in the 5th round, and then the next mock people had him in like the 3rd round, and I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the 2nd round. So if he makes it into the 1st round for a team that's really looking for a defenseman that is showing all the that he's showing the assets that he has shown on the ice, he'd probably be my surprise pick to go in the first round. Considering that he was never ranked anywhere close to the first round.
Okay. That I think that's definitely fair. Yeah, no, when it comes to the US development team, they definitely are a 9-day difference comparing to how they were last year. As we all know, they lost a really big key contributors to them, and Jake Sanderson leading the way this year obviously would be very interesting, and hopefully to see another guy from the US to go in the first round outside of a couple other guys besides Sanderson, of course, Holloway, among others. But yeah, no, that is a very interesting pick to say the least. Yeah, for me, I really don't even have one. I haven't done an in-depth dive past the first round like I know you have. But yeah, no.
And sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
the other
fine.
thing as well, we've done this mock draft now. We've been at it for about 90 minutes. It's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone must have noticed how deep this draft is on forwards. Probably like 20, 25 out of 30 picks here have been forwards, which is fun for a mock draft. But on draft day, don't be surprised if you actually see 10 or 12 defensemen go in the first round, because teams do pick based on need more than fans might think. So you could see some defensemen who are ranked in the second or third round actually make the jump to the first round based on their position. And it's all about supply and demand. If teams are looking for a defenseman and there are not that many defensemen ranked high, we might see some surprises there.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Because when it comes to doing these mock drafts or just having the assumption, even all the analysts, and the guys, whether it's TSN or SN, they think they have it right. And surely there's always a lot of things that do not go in their favor that everyone assumes. So while I do think this first round will be offensively heavy, I find it very hard pressed for it not to be. Just given when you look on paper, when it comes to the actual forward group, the core, like the top 10 forwards, for instance, in this year's draft class, it's phenomenal. Like it's just the amount of depth in this thing as well is just beyond words. Truly, there's a reason why this draft class could go down as possibly one of the best, if not in recent memory, than in NHL history. Time will tell. It's a bold claim right now, but there are a lot of people that have that belief given how deep it is on the offensive front. So defense can definitely be incorporated too. It won't surprise me either. I think I'm fully expecting some key forwards who I think are going to go fairly in the middle of the first round and to drop in the second round. Guys, especially last year, that came to mind for me was, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but with the LA Kings pick.
Samuel Fagemo.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Samuel Fagemo from Sweden?
Oh, no, not him.
The Russian kid.
Yes. The goal scorer. Why am I blanking on his name?
Oh, that's bad. I'm blanking on his name as well.
I know. I feel pathetic. I'm a big fan of his too. I followed him a lot going into last year's draft, and I was baffled.
I actually met him at the draft last year. Let me look it up. This is bad.
Let's hope he's not watching.
Nah, probably not.
No, probably.
He's probably playing golf or something, because that's what most hockey players do in the off season.
Correct.
Kaliev, Arthur Kaliev.
Yes, Arthur Kaliev. He's a bona fide goal scorer. I was baffled to see him slip out of the first round. But he's just one of many examples where we could see things like this happen. I'm actually going to be live streaming the entire first round on that first day of the draft on October 6th. So if you want to stop by to say hello, by all means do it, because that's going to be really fun. I expect a lot of major deals to happen per se. We expect it every year, but this year just definitely feels different given everything and all of the circumstances. So I think nonetheless, we're going to be in for quite the 2020 NHL draft. But this was awesome. Thank you so much, especially for taking the time. I had a blast, and hopefully, if you're down for it, I would love to do more, especially Ranger-centric things with you in the future if you're interested. And if you want to, of course, give yourself a little shout out, make sure to mention your podcast and all that great thing, all those great things. Feel free to go ahead.
So my Twitter account is statboy_Steven. In my bio, you can find a link to my podcast under review. We talk mostly about Ranger stuff like prospects, trade talk. I sometimes add a little bit of CBA talk. I love talking about the CBA, and people People often joke about it, but it comes in handy sometimes, especially during the off season. So yeah, I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open. If you have a question, feel free. I usually respond within a few hours, so I'm always open to have a good conversation about hockey. So
Yeah, no, seriously, thank you again so much. This was really kind of an honor thing because like I've been following you for so long too. So when I saw that you were willing to come on, I was like, oh, that would be perfect to kind of be an icebreaker with doing collabs on the channel going forward. But yeah, no, thank you again so much, Steven. I hope you all the best, and I cannot wait for this year's NHL draft.